and it changes how I really think about revenue operations, is that it's really tempting to be like the all-important person. Like, I love to be needed, Mark. Like, oh, a late night Slack about a board deck presentation. Oh, yes, that like is my love language. But that it's super short-sighted, right? And it it's tempting to hold all the Legos and really feel important, but the real power of operations is what happens when you're out sick. Or God forbid you take a vacation. Um,
All right, everybody, welcome to this episode of the RevAmp podcast. I'm joined here by Jackie Leahy. I've always admired Jackie kind of from a distance. She's really fun to follow on social. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit as well. But before we jump into the meat and potatoes here, Jackie, why don't you introduce yourself to the folks at home, a little bit about you and your background and how you got to where you're at.
yeah, so good to be here, Mark. Long time coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm Jackie Leahy. I'm actually a former kindergarten teacher. And I pivoted to tech in 2015. And I started out as a BDR and went into outbound prospecting and loved it, and eventually was a BDR team lead and then director of business development. At my third startup, I was hired number 10, the first lady at Link Squares. And I got to build the entire outbound prospecting program. So what we did, how we did it, what tools, who we hired, how we onboarded them, and everything. And in the course of that, somebody had to figure out the back end of Salesforce.
Hmm.
And I was that accidental admin. And over the course of the 2 years there, I absolutely just fell in love. So I've actually been on the consulting side of revenue operations since 2020. And I started my own fractional RevOps consortium in September of 2022.
Wow. Consortium. That sounds very.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep.
It's, you were a former kindergarten teacher. I'm a former kindergarten student, so funny how that
The
happens.
parallels are uncanny.
Right. So that's really, I mean, obviously a non-traditional route
Mhm.
for this role, which is great. I think that um, I'm a big fan of non-traditional everything. Has there been any crossover between being a kindergarten teacher and being a RevOps,
Oh
both
my gosh.
house and now in your consortium?
Yeah. I mean, being a kindergarten teacher, it's so much like the operations behind classroom management is so intense. So I heard this from a mentor and I really took it to heart. It's that the measurement of, or like the degree of your classroom management isn't what happens when you're there. It's what happens when you're sick all of a sudden, you have to call out and there's a random sub that you didn't exactly plan for. What do your kids do in that situation? And that's really kind of changed my world. And it changes how I really think about revenue operations, is that it's really tempting to be like the all-important person. Like, I love to be needed, Mark. Like, oh, a late night Slack about a board deck presentation. Oh, yes, that like is my love language. But that it's super short-sighted, right? And it it's tempting to hold all the Legos and really feel important, but the real power of operations is what happens when you're out sick. Or God forbid you take a vacation. And I do think that there's real power in setting up an organization to do things without me, right? So really seeing Activate the Magic, that's my firm, like our relationship is really to fire ourselves,
Right.
right? Like to get you in a situation where you don't need us anymore, either because we got you to such a cool position where you're able to build your own team internally, or we've got things moving and grooving so well that you can handle it in-house. So
Yeah, so take off the
yeah.
training kind of thing.
Yep.
Okay. Well, that's really it's awesome. But I think kind of transitioning into the topic um around, internal adoption and the challenges around that. And when we talk about internal adoption, we're talking about, I guess, kind of our internal customers who are, whoever the people on the team are that are going to be using the solution you're implementing or the process you are wanting to apply. So I guess starting from the beginning, what are the challenges around getting internal adoption? And when you hit that challenge, what are the negative outcomes of it?
Yeah. So I look at the real reasons that your CRM isn't being adopted, right?
Mhm.
And there's two realms. The first realm is sort of human dynamics.
Mhm.
And then the second realm is tactical, like strategies. And so in the human dynamics, why isn't it being adopted? It's you. You are the reason why. And then
You
also
being the
it's
RevOps person, or you being the person that adopted?
you. It's you.
Yeah,
And then it's also it's them.
right.
And in the tactical, it's your process and it's your rollout. So
Yeah.
those are the sort of four quadrants.
Mhm. And does that apply specifically for CRM or like a new tool? Does it also apply to a new process as well? Is it
Yeah.
applicable? Yeah.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, when you get into the tactical strategies, there might be specific tools or like templates that
Mhm.
you can use specifically for like a new sales process rollout or something. But the core tenets, um, it can be applied to whether it's a new medic thing for the sales team or legal ops is now getting tied into Salesforce, anything.
Yeah. So kind of diving a little bit deeper into, the topic of it, um, we talk about humans, right? We're talking about you,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
those are real people, right?
Yep.
When you have this kind of top-down approach to things where you don't really consider the human element that's brings the complexity to it, and it's almost impossible to completely game out all of that without kind of actually being there.
Mhm.
So, you know, um, you talk about the challenge of assuming everyone else is just lazy and that's why they're not doing it. But in reality, it's other things. So what are the ways in which you can apply whatever pressure or influence to get better in compliance and
Yeah.
yeah, adoption?
Yeah. So if you've read the book How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie or Carnegie, I've heard it's actually Carnegie.
I listened to the audiobook and they pronounced it Carnegie.
Carnegie, mind blowing. Um, I think one of the coolest concepts there is really putting it in terms of why it matters to the other person.
Yep.
Right. So with the framework of a personality matrix, right? There's lots of different frameworks to apply, whether it's DISC or predictive index. There's all sorts of MBTI, all the things, right? But there's four core personality styles, like communication styles. There's promoting, supporting, controlling, and analyzing. And the key is really knowing yourself and what's important to me, what I focus on, what drains me, my go-to, my strengths, um, but also my weaknesses. Like what pisses me off like no other. Like what are the buttons that people are probably pushing that I get to really be responsible for?
Is it like a quadrant where you fall somewhere,
Mhm.
or is it like you only have one label?
Oh no, I mean everyone's all four,
Oh,
right? So it's like to what extreme you are and in what combination is always, yeah. And it's a simplified model, right? It's
mm,
not exactly humans are fantastic and complicated and nuanced, but it's a helpful framework. So I'm a promoting style. Like everything is awesome, right? I love to be expressive and creative, but what my weakness is, like, I can be a little bit insincere. I can lack follow through. I can sort of appear phony because, like, are you telling me you're actually excited about Salesforce screen flows? Like, no, I am, but like that's just not relatable to a lot of people. And then the there's the frictions. Now let's get into it's you, right? So it's them rather. So your sales team is probably a lot of controlling styles. They're competitive, they want it their way. The only way is the fastest way,
Right.
sort of thing. Um, and they can be a little bit of a tyrant. And I feel like a lot of RevOps people were either I'm probably a little weird as a promoter, but there's a lot of analyzers and a lot of supporters, right? So the analyzers are the ones that are all the way deep in the details. And when they're interacting with a controller, like they're just gonna avoid, right? And the only thing that they'll go to back themselves up and prove their point is more data. Where the last thing a controlling style person will ever pay attention to is more data, especially if it's like more minute than whatever data you brought to them.
I'm like imagining the RevOps, like a jocks and geeks interaction here.
Yeah.
And sales folks tend to, a lot of them kind of type A personalities, and yes.
Yeah. So there's within the four quadrants, there's informal versus formal. So promoters and supporters tend to be a lot more informal, a little bit more relationship oriented. We'll say, oh, it feels blah, 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 right? Whereas the formal is more the controlling style and the analyzing style. They come from the head, they're more task oriented. So if you're a supporter promoter, you might feel barked at, either from a salesperson who's telling you what to do or from an analyzer who's like, no, this is the way. And it's like, oh, you're hurting my feelings. And it's like, if you're an analyzer controller, it's like, what are you talking about your feelings? Like that's not even on the chessboard. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's interesting taking this kind of systematized approach to an element that often is not really considered, at least where it's like, okay, we have the game plan. This is what we're going to do. This is the rollout plan. But the part you're talking about where, most people are considering the fields and the process in the technology, you're considering the people that are going to be using this and how to, align to their, operating system, how to connect to their API, right? And so,
yes, I love that, Mark. How to connect to their API. Oh, it's brilliant. I'm stealing it. It's mine now.
as long as I get a little citation, it's fine. It's all yours. I
You
doubt
might
that.
get an asterisk at some point.
But I totally get it, and I think it's often forgotten, and mostly because a lot of times in business, it's just feelings are less important. You got to kind of suck it up and be a stoic in a lot of ways. Whether that's good or bad, I make no judgments on it, but it's sometimes ineffective. So, obviously, at least in my experience, this approach is not often done, as far as I can tell. When you've worked in-house and when you work with folks now, is this the kind of the focus on this element of it something that they find, are happy about, are surprised by, or do you not even mention it and you just kind of go forward with it?
That's a little bit of the magic and activate the magic, right? Sometimes I can make things look really easy but in the background, I've got the CPU is really going, right? So trying to log in as a user and see it from their perspective.
You're really running with these
Yeah, yeah. Well, but I've
analogies.
got the analyzer in me, right? Like
Right.
yeah, like connect to their API and like log in as and like, oh, like conceptually, I really have to step into their shoes and like, oh, right. Why? Like, if I'm a controlling slash analyzing salesperson, no amount of here, you click here and you click here, it's ever going to satisfy me if I think this whole thing is stupid.
Right.
If there's no direct line between these clicks and scrolls and stupid things to my commission, like there's no amount of enablement. God, I hate that word, enablement. That's gonna traverse that cavern, right? We really have to step into them and what's gonna make it actually important to them.
It's interesting because in our world, in the business world, enablement is a good thing. When you use that kind of terminology in the psychology world, it is often
Blah
not
blah blah. Yeah,
a
often.
bad thing.
I submit that it's equally as stupid. Unless you're really keeping like let let's be effing for real, right? With enablement. Are you covering your butt or are you actually driving adoption? Are you actually making a difference for your end users?
Right. Yeah. And so, assuming end users aren't lazy, right? They're motivated by their experience and what their incentives are, and how does it help them do what they are, and they have a healthy dose of hesitancy, probably from previous experience where they got loaded with these irrelevant new processes that all it did was make things take longer and didn't have any value. So, what is kind of the Rosetta Stone here in terms of how you appeal to these humans on
Mm-hmm.
a real level to kind of make that impact? What is the kind of keystone that you're going after?
Yeah. So you're gonna want to hit the different love languages, right? There's no one size fits all. So you're gonna look at who your end users are.
Mhm.
They're probably gonna be some sort of controlling, analyzing, or controlling, promoting people, and just kind of know them and know what's going to like if you were what radio station would they listen to, what format would that radio station be in, and make your resources, guides, training, onboarding, enablement, make that a match for what they need. So like good God, if you I one of the things I have a hard time with like Salesforce and stuff is like written documentation. Tell me, give me a GIF. Give me a for the love of everything is holy, give me a GIF with a little like arrow. Thank you. I've got it. Right. And so I'm probably speaking for a lot of promoters and controllers when I say that.
Yeah.
Right. Um, but also if I'm interfacing with finance, a GIF might actually make them very concerned.
Yeah.
Have you thought that out? Like, we are actually fiscally responsible for things, lady. It's like, right. I really get to lean in on what would be scrumptious to an analyzer.
Interesting. And this idea about humans preferring the path to least resistance. Can you tell me a little bit about that and how that translates to this whole concept?
Yeah, I think humans, we're alive, so we've evolved to be here. So obviously, we haven't been doing things that actively actively get us killed, right? And we're driven to survive, not necessarily to thrive. So as long as I can keep my job and make the money, like why would I do anything beyond that?
Right.
And if we really relate with that as neutral, that's not bad, it's not good, it's just what's so. So how can we dance with whatever is so?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, it's a really, I think, novel approach to actually getting adoption, because level of adoption of anything new is often a key metric. But
Mhm.
if your only plan is to like brute force it down people's throats, you're probably going to get a lot of resistance. Whereas if you map it out in the way you're mapping out the system
Yeah,
that you're implementing, you're going to have a much greater likelihood of success.
yeah,
So from your perspective and as you approach this, obviously we're in a time where everything, it just seems like everything's moving so much faster, and there's no, everything changes, and there's a lot of insecurity uh, from humans, businesses in general. How do you think this plays out in terms of the way you approach this as the rest of this year plays out and we move into next year? Obviously, for all we know, there's going to be, a huge paradigm shift will happen, whether good or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah. It's basically a feeling of like brace for impact, right? And everything that I'm talking about is just so much more heightened, right? So it's no longer, I might not get my way, I might get fired, right? Like, we don't have the runway to, like, and a lot of RevOps people are, like, incredibly talented RevOps people are out of a job and looking for a job. And literally a year and a half ago, you that was unheard of,
Yeah,
right? And but it's the same thing for if you step into the shoes of the CMO or the CRO or everyone is threatened. And what actually happens to the brain under threat is the blood withdraws from the neocortex, which is right behind your forehead, right? That's the part of like advanced reasoning. And it withdraws back to more of the brainstem. And that's sort of the survival instinct. So the last thing you want is your end users to be in flight, fright, or free, fight or
yeah,
freeze when you're trying to just show them how they can create an opportunity. So it's so important to understand the reputation of me, the reputation, like what is known about Jackie, the RevOps person, what is known about our sales force, what is the conversation to really, no matter like true or not, what it's just what's so really just stand in it, take it on and just be responsible for it. And it's more important than ever to really make everyone around me feel safe and important, right? The only thing to bring the blood flow back to the new cortex, there's some physical things you tap on your forehead or scratch your head and cross your median lines so your right is on the left side and left is on the right to sort of activate that. But the only thing that'll bring blood back is when people feel safe and valued.
wow. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people can relate to this idea.
Yeah,
You're in stress,
yeah,
you do revert often to the fight or flight, and I find it frustrating personally that my objective judgment making seems, when it would be most beneficial, seems to
yeah,
be less accessible, which is like this kind of paradox of Kafka-esque type thing.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
that's actually very interesting. But you know, when you're in a project or a scenario, you've rolled it out in this way. You've mapped out how people will interact, and you've kind of
mm-hmm.
worked out what their incentives are and how to speak their love language. And with all of that done, there still isn't adoption, meaning maybe the tool just wasn't effective, right? Maybe it
Yeah,
was a fail.
yeah.
How do you kind of make that judgment and say, maybe we roll this back, and B, like what do you do in those scenarios?
Yeah, so it's going to depend. Is it the solutioning process? Is it how you got to whatever is in front of them that they're not adopting? Or is the problem truly like it's a great product? We've had user authorized testing, it's fantastic. It literally just isn't being used, or everyone's confused. So you get, what is it? What's
Yeah.
the problem? Right. So 9 out of 10 times in that case, it's probably going to be your process, because believe it or not, some things do adopt themselves. Like the biggest aha moment was when we were rolling out Gong at Link Squares, and the reps started downloading that Gong iPhone app and listening to call recordings like they were podcasts on their commute. What?
Yeah.
What? Right? So if whatever it is that you're building is actually super supportive and helpful, and the end user is like, oh, this is going to help me actually do my job, this is great, it'll have a buzz about it, it'll go viral, like it will. So and when it comes to your process, I think the biggest thing, there's 3 shifts, like mindset shifts. The first one is going from order taker to investigative anthropologist, right? Usually when we're brought into a botched rollout of something, right, they fire their consultants, they bring us in, it's usually they hired a Salesforce consultant who is probably 100 times more technically competent than I am, right? But they took whatever discovery, whatever business requirements, and they just literally turned that into technical requirements, and they were off to the races. They didn't validate it with anybody else. There's no V1. There's no, let me reflect back to you what I heard, right? That's usually the biggest thing that we're overcoming. And so switching from, well, this is what you said you want. Great. That might be contractually what you agreed to, but are they going to refer you or keep it? No, it's kind of short-sighted business wise. And really shifting into being an investigative anthropologist. Like, how does this creature currently do this? What, like I am now filming a nature documentary, and I want to know, like, I want to like actually see these people in action and what they're doing.
With
And
the
in
like
this
British
next,
guy narrating in your mind.
yes, yes,
This
yeah,
the sales development representative is native to the. Yeah, I love
yeah,
it.
yeah,
It's funny. I'm like imagining a skit in my head that.
so good, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. And so I assume that you've had those kind of situations.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. Like right now we're figuring out, like there's just a failed sort of Salesforce Experience Cloud, which is like a partner portal. It was just a botched execution from someone, which based on what the client is telling me they want, that's what they got.
Right.
But it's obviously not doing the trick. So pausing, being like, what do you mean by they can see my accounts? Like, what does that mean? And yeah, just being super curious, and like it's like you're studying a like an alien life form.
Right. Yeah, forensic approach to the
Yes,
whole thing.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so as we roll kind of head into the end of this, we have a few
Mm.
minutes left on the clock. Um, looking forward, your approach, and I don't know if it's completely unique to you, but this approach that you're talking about, that which is quite novel to me. Have you found a greater level of people being open to it recently? Do you get?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the times are changing, right? And beyond doing silly things in Salesforce. Like my mission is to transform how we relate to each other at work, right? Let's instead of like beating each other up and being competitive, what are we creating? Like let's have some fun. Let's have some joyful, powerful, sustainable growth.
Yeah, I'm nodding so much.
Yeah, you're nodding. Yeah.
Let's do it. I don't know what it is, but let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's treat each other like people. Like the collectively join forces. Like let's have some fun, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. I mean, the positivity is a breath of fresh air. Obviously, we often can get sucked into the banality and
It's seductive. Complaining is people love to have a problem. Like we love to have, this is an Alex Hormozy thing. People love having potential and a problem because it's a buffer and it's an excuse of why they're not living up, right? It's
oil.
yep. It's a shame protection.
Hear that? Yeah, I'm just like self-analyzing now. Everything you're saying, like, oh, all right,
Mark goes into a deep dark spiral. Uh-oh.
yeah, right when I'm gonna go sit in front of the mirror and like cry and eat some ice cream. So to the folks at home, if you enjoy this topic and are super fascinated and interested, like I am, Jackie is going to be, has a session on the agenda for the upcoming Rev Ops AF conference in San Diego, which Deal Hub will be at. We have a really fun, this is legitimately fun thing set up for it. It's a bit of a secret, but it's going to be, I think, enjoyable. Yeah. And I know Jackie's going to be there, so
Promo code Jacki, Jacki, for 10% off. And then I get some credit somewhere. I might win if I get the most signups. Mark, do you know about this? I might get the high roller suite.
That's really?
Yeah.
All right, so I'm going to edit that out. Use Mark, M-A-R-K. No, I'm just joking. I know Deal Hub has one, but if we win it, I wouldn't share anyone. So Jackie, before we jump off, why don't you tell the folks at home other places they can follow you or learn more about you or what you're doing?
Thank you. Yeah, so I love LinkedIn. That's my social network of choice. So Jackie Leahy, Jacki Leahy. I'm building two different communities. One for go-to-market operators who know that their brilliance is made for more than simply exchanging their time for money. So this is called the Cauldron. So we have a Slack org and we meet once a month. You might see the Cauldron Witching Hour. So into thecauldron.com with little dashes between the words. And the other one is Soul and Strategy. It's for lady entrepreneurs to really connect with some brilliance. We also meet once a month for a monthly coming home session. Next one is May 8th.